determine a starting player. That player will get the board labeled A through F. The other player will take the board labeled G through L. Next, each player will take one of their warehouse boards, placing it in front of them, and also placing one of the markers onto the grain, to the wood, to the brick, and also on the fish in the appropriate spots. Each player would also gather 3 francs and place it to the side of their player board. Next, gather up all the building tiles labeled A all the way to L and place them in rows between each player board within easy reach. The first player board should have his dial set to the A. The second player board should have his dial set to G. After setup, the game should resemble something like this. First thing you would do is take all the A building tiles and flip them over to the building side. And we're going to go over how these buildings work here in just a second and how you purchase them. Let's take a look at our player board real quick. We have 3 things here to talk about. First, we have the letter in the building, the A. We have a number underneath, and then we also have this little symbol at the very top of the building. The little symbol denotes who is the first player for this round. The letter of the building denotes which buildings should be revealed. We've already covered that by revealing the A buildings. The number underneath determines the amount of actions that will be taking place during this round. Now let's cover how do you perform these actions and how do you purchase buildings. To purchase buildings, simply look at the top of the building itself. For instance, this hardware store says it requires 1 wood and 2 brick. The farmland, 1 franc. The grocery store, 2 wood. The wood company, 2 brick. And the clay mound, 3 francs. Look at your player board to see if you have the available amount of resources to purchase the building. Player 1 decides that they would like to try to buy the grocery store. Now the grocery store is going to cost him 2 wood as denoted at the top of the building itself. So player 1 would look at their player board to decide if they have 2 wood. Grain is the first yellow, wood is brown, brick is red, and fish is blue. We have numbers here to the side, and we also have numbers here at the bottom. To determine how much material you have, simply add the 2 numbers together. So the wood right now starts in the 0 column and the 2 column. That means you do have 2 wood. Therefore, they could purchase the grocery store for the required amount of resources it takes to, and simply move their resource marker back to the 0, 0 mark, showing that they have used up all of their wood for this round. They would then take the purchased building and place it in the 0 column on their player board, right here. Now that player 1 has performed one of their actions, player 2 can perform one of their actions, and they can decide to purchase one of the buildings as well that are listed up here in the A column. It's important to note you're either going to be purchasing buildings or using buildings on your turn. Once player 2 has used up their second action, it would go back to player 1. After player 1 was finished, then it would end the round. Once the round ends, you would spin the dial on each of the players' boards. Now let's look at player 1's board again. Notice that the dial is pointing to the B for the B buildings to be revealed. Plus, we notice there's a 3 underneath, which says that there's still 3 actions per round. However, they're missing a sunshine mark. Remember the sunshine mark that was over the A? Well, that is now on the second player's board over the H, which denotes that player 2 now will become player 1, and they will take the first action for this round. Remember, there's only 3 actions per this round again, so this player will take 2 while the other player just takes 1. Go ahead and place your B buildings into play. And this round is ready to begin. Why don't we demonstrate on how you actually use your buildings? Player 2 decides that they want to try to use their clay mound. The clay mound is located in the 2 section on their player board, located here. What that means is that they can use the clay mound 2 times in a single action. Let's demonstrate what this means. The clay mound has a red arrow right here, which denotes that because it was in the number 2 section on the player board, we now get to move our clay 2 spaces up to the right. Then it's also got the clay, and it shows it being moved 1 more additional time. That would exhaust this building, and now we would take it and place it in the 0 column of our player board, showing that it has been exhausted. As such. Another action that you can do on your turn is you can decide to pay 1 franc to your opponent and use their building in any one of the sections on their player board. So for instance, let's say that that player did not actually use that clay mound and it was still on the number 2. Well, this player here then could decide to pay that player 1 franc and actually use that, exhausting that building and placing it into the 0 column on that player's board. Now, one thing to notice is that notice that as this dial keeps rotating and as buildings are not being used, you can use more and more actions per building. But notice that this one here actually has a franc underneath it. What that means is that if your building is in this section and you decide to use it at this time, you will actually gain 1 franc from the bank to add to your supply. However, notice if it goes one more dial and it gets to this little exclamation mark. What that means is that if you have not used your building and it is in this section at the beginning of the round, you must sell these buildings. You actually would sell the building for half of its value. So, for instance, this farmland is 4 value, so you would actually gain 2 coins from the bank to add to your supply, and then you would take this building and put it back into the general supply so that both players could, if they decided to, purchase this building at a later time. Each player's warehouse board has a nice little guide here at the top right of the corner. What that helps you to do is that whenever you're moving your goods around, to determine the quantity of each movement. So, for instance, we know if we take the fish and move it backwards 1 space, we would be losing 1 fish. However, let's say if our fish was right here. We got 9 plus 6, so we have 15 total fish. This guide would help us that if, let's say if we had to pay 12 food, to be able to know how to move our fish counter to be able to pay. So if we move it this way, we've paid 4, we've paid 4, stack it here, and we know we've paid all 12 food. Some buildings would require resources to pay, such as brick and wood, and others would require food. For instance, this weekly market here symbolizes a tin and a pot. That shows that means it's food that would require to be able to get this weekly market. It's got a blue and a yellow, which denotes that you can pay in either fish or grain, or a combo of the two, to be able to purchase this building and put it onto your player board. Some buildings will give you a set amount of points. Some of them will let you perform actions and give you points. And then some of them are just going to be points based upon how many resources of a particular type of resource you have left at the end of the game. So for instance, the fish factory right here, victory points are determined by how many fish that you have on your player board at the end of the game. The town hall, because it has this little lock here, is worth 26 points, and you would not place the town hall onto your player board after purchasing. Actually, you would just place it to the side. The reason is because you're never going to actually be able to perform a function or an action with the town hall. Last but not least, let's take a look at the church square. The church square would give you 14 points at the end of the game, or 14 francs or money. However, it's allowing you to perform actions. What that means is it would go onto your player board and you would perform actions throughout the game, and at the end of the game, as long as you still possess this church square, you would gain 14 victory points at the end of the game. Once the dial here makes it 1 complete spin around the player 1's board, then you would only reference player 2's board from the rest of the game to determine the buildings that would be revealed and also the actions. If you notice here, at the end of player 1's board, once the F buildings are revealed, you're going to be up to 5 actions. Let's see just how many actions you're going to be able to get up to on player 2's board. Notice here, L, that would be the last round of the game, there will be a total of 9 actions that will be performed, 5 by one player and 4 by the other. Add up the total value of all your buildings at the end of the game to determine the winner. If you did move the dial the last time and you had a building that was in the exclamation point, you would go ahead and sell off that building, gaining half that amount of value in francs in return. You would also add up all your remaining francs that you did have in your possession. Whoever has the most wins the game. This will conclude this how to play for Le Havre. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.